we can also take this benefit cost analysis to a different context. I think in the real world, we are constantly trying to contribute certain resources in trying to get certain effects. And whenever we have alternatives or opportunities, the composition of their contribution and the benefit that they can get will be different. So what we usually can do is we want to basically to see whether or not the amount of money that we spend can have the maximal effect, which is so-called cost effectiveness analysis. So when we are comparing two alternatives, we are not considering just how much cost of each alternatives, right? And we cannot say that this one has the best effect, because this best effect may cost a lot more than what others need to cost. So you probably can imagine what I'm trying to lead to. That is, we can use this benefit and cost ratio as a way to rank these different alternatives and choose the one which come out with the maximal ratio. However, there are also other constraints. It could be budget constraint, there could be effectiveness constraint, and so on. So we cannot just look at those ratios. I think in the beginning of the class, I also mentioned that ratio is something quite easy to be considered, quite intuitive, but usually we cannot compare two ratios directly, because these different ratios have different bases. Some bases are very big, so the ratio could be small, but the amount created is a lot bigger. Right? So while we are looking at these ratio, and at the same time we want to look at different constraints, and we are going to go through this procedure as well as an example in the following few slides. So if we want to do this cost-effective analysis, first of all, we need to determine our goals. With different goals, then we are constrained by different requirements. Right? If we want to maximize the effect, then we could be constrained by, we want to, at least we need to have certain effect. If we don't have this effect constraint, but we may be limited by the budget that we can get, the budget that we can spend over a certain period of time. Right? Or maybe we have time constraint. We need to get it done as quickly as possible. So budget, if there's no budget constraint, then all the resources need to put in to make sure that we can finish the project within certain amount of time. Otherwise, it will not be feasible. So other than just the cost effectiveness, the ratio, we need to consider all these feasibility. Once we can clarify that their feasibility, then we'll move on to possible selection. So the goal is the most important. Then we want to identify the imposed restriction. Okay, as I have already indicated, that budget could be one restriction. Then we want to identify all the feasible alternatives. Okay, these alternatives need to be able to meet our goal. They can all reach the goal, but we haven't had more detailed analysis. But we need to identify all the feasible goals. If we want to consider transportation, there are many feasible alternatives. If we want to build certain products, there are many feasible alternatives. We want to identify all of them. There are different bridges that we can build. There are different, for example, street lamps that we can use. There are many feasible alternatives. And then again, for the preparation, we also need to identify the interest rate. Without interest rate, we cannot compare. We cannot adapt the time value of money into our analysis. And then we need to compute the life cycle cost. Life cycle cost rather than a simple, a shorter part of the cost. Just as we have already discussed earlier, we cannot just look at the initial investment or initial construction. We still need to look at the costs that make the system works in the future. So after we finish building the system, chances are we need to have people helping up with the operation and maintenance, and there are parts need to be repaired, need to be replaced throughout the product life cycle. All of them need to be computed, and we need to compute their equivalent life cycle cost. We want to turn these life cycle costs of all the feasible alternatives into the same form so that we can compare. There are at least two types of the cost effectiveness index, or two approaches. Okay, one is so-called fixed cost approach. One is called fixed effectiveness approach. So fixed cost is more like we have the budget. We have the budget to do that. So we have to achieve our goal with the constraint of the budget. So that limits our alternatives. Or we have this fixed effectiveness, meaning that we need to reach the specific goal, specific level of effectiveness. So if it's below that, then it's not a feasible alternative. Okay, so when we are developing these indices, you need to know that we may be constrained by one of the two or even other constraints. And then we can compute the cost effectiveness ratio for each alternative, as we have already described earlier. And then we'll select the best alternative with the maximum cost effectiveness index. Okay. So then we have many. For each alternative, we can compute its cost effectiveness ratio, which is more like benefit cost ratio. We want to compute that. Then we can compare and select. So this is what we meant in step 6 on different approaches. Fixed cost approach. Basically, we have our budget constraint, but we want to maximize effectiveness. On the other hand, if we have fixed effectiveness approach, so we have constraint on the effectiveness, we need to at least meet the minimum effectiveness requirement. Then we want to minimize the cost. Okay. So these two approaches, we can select one. We may be constrained by one or the other, and we'll follow the constraint and the objective or the goal, so that we can develop our index and compare the alternatives accordingly. So the case study, as I just described, is selecting a weapon system. is very common projects that or problem that we'll encounter. Here it is a weapon system. Again, it could be a machine, it could be an airplane, a product, specific products, or it could be the air conditioner. All of them require us to make comparison of the effectiveness is going to bring versus the cost is going to consume. So for the weapon system, assuming that we have 6 different weapon systems that we can choose from, and these alternatives, these 6 alternatives, each has its advantage and disadvantage, and in the end, there's this effectiveness assessment, that is probability of kill. So you look at the last column, probability of kill from A1 to A6. You can tell that A4 and A5 has very high probability to kill. So chances are they are more expensive. Yeah, chances are they are more expensive. And alternative 1, the probability of kill is only 1/3. Okay, 1/3 of probability. Chances are the cost will be quite low. That's usually the case with low cost on the product, but the effectiveness is not very high. So again, we can play with them and see which one will give us the best result, meeting our requirement. So these are 6 different weapon systems. Well, basically they seem to be some navigation and guiding systems. Some require higher costs of development because the technologies are more advanced. But when you start to operate them or even maintain them, it could be, the cost could be lower. But some will require high cost all the way. Right? But in our cases, these alternatives all come from well, basically higher cost, high performance, lower cost, low performance. It's just that it just depends on where our constraints are, and within the constraint, we'll choose the one which has the best cost effectiveness index. So we can list the associated costs here from A1 to A6, and we compute their individual present worth at the interest rate of 10%. So for A1, you can see that this is it has the lowest life cycle cost. And A2, A3 surprisingly is with the lower possibility of kill. It requires higher cost than high life cycle cost than A4, and A5 has the highest life cycle costs. So these are the costs. These are the present worths. In fact, these present worths will or may pose a constraint on the feasibility of alternatives. Suppose we have certain budget constraint. Without budget constraint, maybe we'll choose A5. It has the highest possibility of kill. However, the cost is very high. Okay, so we need to further analyze their situation. If we list out all the data, so we have this cost per unit. Okay, per unit. Again, A1 is the best. A5 has the highest one. Okay, probability of kill. Again, we have A5 the best and A1 the worst. Then we also compute the cost effectiveness issue. Here the cost is the cost of the product. The effectiveness is the possibility of kill. Right? The possibility of kill. That's the goal of this weapon. We want to make sure that the money that we spend can have the highest probability of kill. Reversely, we may have an estimate on for 1 kill per kill, how much money do we need to spend to get 1 kill. So these two are just the opposite of the evaluation. They'll get us the same result. So we take these data, we can plot them, and here x-axis is the present value of life cycle cost. That is the present worth of all the expenses. Okay, and the effectiveness cost per kill. Right, we want to have the lowest cost per kill. Okay, so we can draw up the budget constraint, which is 500 million. That's the budget constraint. Okay, and then we can look at the cost per kill. We didn't look at just simply look at the possibility of kill, because we don't know how much it's going to cost. So here we use cost per kill. We want to have the lowest cost per kill. So here we see clearly quite a few alternatives are outside the boundary of the budget. So those are not our alternative. We cannot take those alternative. And A5, although has the highest possibility of kill, however, its cost per kill, that is to get that effectiveness, the cost is way too high. So it's outside the acceptable region. So it cannot be considered either. So only alternative A1 and A2 are within the feasible region to be considered. And A1 and A2, if you compare them, as you can see that the cost per kill for A2 is a lot smaller than the cost per kill for A1. So in the end, we'll choose A2 as our final decision and select A2 to be acquired or to be developed. Okay. So up until now, we look at a lot of these cost, benefit, and seems to be a very simple computation, and we derive the criterion, the evaluation or assessment criterion for a single alternative. And later we illustrated different ways to assessing the value of different alternatives, and select one of them as our final decision. And to some example, you can probably tell that these simple calculation, in fact, can be very important in terms of decision support. Of course, when we are utilizing these indices or these criteria, we still need to understand the nature of the problem and decide or establish the right procedures for comparing different alternatives. In the end, we may be able to utilize this ratio, cost-benefit ratio, in different forms. But once we have the right context for the problem, the use of the ratio will be reasonable. Okay, again, ratio is something very intuitive, very easy to understand. However, it also presents some risks in terms of its true value. And if we have the right context for using such ratios, these ratios are very good tools for us to make assessment and help us to select the best solution.